Wealth creation is very different for business owners. If you like the idea of creating wealth outside of your business, then you're going to love this podcast where we discuss the following things. Why your business should become the tool to fund your wealth creation strategy. Why business owners have a distinct advantage when it comes to wealth creation, and how to go about building your wealth creation A-team. To get notified of our upcoming podcasts and videos, please hit subscribe, turn your notifications on, and please share this video with someone else. Charlie, welcome back to the Sideshow podcast.
It has been a long time since I've been on this show, Matt.
Not only has it been a long time, but it's also been a completely different guest appearance. I think back then it was the Outsourcing Angels podcast where you were sharing some insights into the outsourcing world, which I imagine now is a far more common conversation, especially in the wake of or during, middle of whatever, COVID. But we're not here today to talk about outsourcing. We're here to talk about your new business, Full Stack Business Owner.
Yeah, super exciting. I know the internet moves fast compared to the trade, I will say. It's almost like dog years, right? It's 7 years to one when you look at how fast the internet moves.
Yeah, I must admit, it's almost a full-time job trying to keep up with your businesses. But anyway, it's good to have you here, and I'm super pumped about this most recent one because for the listeners and viewers out there, well, it was kind of bittersweet. So for you guys out there, Charlie was actually my podcast editor, which he recently decided to throw me to the wolves on because he shut that business down so that he could focus on this business. Now, bittersweet in the sense of the sweet part of this business is it is an amazing resource. And I've said many times, I feel like you've also almost been speaking directly to me in half these podcasts and the content you've been creating. But essentially, it's about helping business owners with their wealth creation opportunities. Can I say that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. How about you give us an explanation of it? Because I know there's been a few issues lately which you've had to navigate, so I don't want to get anything wrong.
All right, well, I'll put the story into this that I think will help a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, and this was true for myself, when I got started in business, the reason I started a business is actually because I wanted something more for my life. Now, to be specific in here, like I was working as a plumber at this time of all things, which is very relatable to this show and audience. And I was working on a commercial site in Melbourne, believe it or not, when Melbourne used to be the cool place to be. And I was in there and I was looking at it and I was kind of just getting by. And I really wanted to be able to set my life up in a way where, number one, I was able to provide for my family, which I think is a very, very common thing. But then under that, it's not just provide for them financially, it's like the time thing as well. And I was kind of grinding it out at this point, working 6 days a week, big long hours, a lot of travel. And I was like, if I keep going like this, it's not really going to get me to where I want to be. And I think for a lot of particular trades, this is the reason we end up starting our own businesses, often in the trade. Right? It's very, very hard to reach a level of financial independence if you're always just working for someone else.
Yeah.
Now, the next step that normally comes, and I'll say normally, is we get started in business and it turns out to be a little bit harder than we expected. And it becomes all consuming and addictive. And before you know it, your entire life is your business. Now, when we kind of look back to it and we go, well, we got into this thing because we want to actually, create some wealth, have some legacy, have some time, have some freedom. And we end up getting very burnt out and often destroying a lot of the areas of our lives. I know I certainly did. Like my health was the first thing to go. I was like, well, no, the business is the focus.
Yeah.
And then my relationship is like I'd be out for dinner with my wife and just, doing emails on my phone at the table. or on the holidays. And like, I really took stock of this and said that, well, look, if I'm going to be getting into business because I wanted to get these outcomes from it and I'm not getting them, something has to change. And I'm pretty sure I'm the problem. I'm pretty sure it's me. People have conquered this. So I kind of went on a bit of a journey myself in developing my business in a way to kind of support this wealth creation side of things. Mm-hmm. And over the last, I'll say probably quite a number of years now, I've actually reached a point where I would like to say I think I've done pretty well for myself.
Yeah.
Now, in the wake of that, the thing that's become overwhelmingly disturbing to me is how many business owners actually end up broke. Like, I kid you not, it surprised me that so many of us go into this journey really wanting to achieve a level of like financial independence and also time independence, but then end up getting the complete opposite of it. End up working longer, having less money, less freedom, always having to invest in their business for X, Y reason, only to end up at this place. And I was like, look, somebody's got to change this conversation. And that's where I put my hand up and said, well, look, Full Stack Business Owner, which is the name of the business I run today and the podcast, which you've been listening to and hopefully enjoying, came to it. And what's been really, really interesting is as myself and my co-host Grant on that podcast have been sharing more about what we've been getting up to with wealth creation, it's really hit a nerve for people and getting people to think about what they're doing with their money and how they're running their businesses so they can create a better level of financial independence in their life.
Sure. So I think, I mean, I'm going to speak a lot to, I suppose, my own position with this sort of stuff. And I don't know, people may relate to this or they may not, but I've always sort of been the type of person that has sort of wanted to go against the norm. And so, a lot of people were getting jobs and they were, buying homes and this kind of stuff. And I was focused on building my business, and I had been for a long time. And I always had the intention of, getting the business to a point where then, I had that established, and then it gave me opportunity to invest into things, whatever they may be, property shares, cryptos, all that kind of carry on. And it's taken a long time to get there. And in truth, sometimes I think, I haven't done it right. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners of you out there that will be thinking, man, I'm definitely behind the 8 ball here. But what I love about your podcast and the information, the content you guys are producing, is that it's pretty non-biased. Like, it's a bit of a relief to hear that there are options for people at all different stages. And I know one of the big things you preach is, well, the business should come first. And I was like, as soon as I heard that, I thought, yes, finally, someone's told me something that I wanted to hear. But, it's been a really interesting, journey. I know you guys have only had a handful of podcasts, but so far I've just been learning so much from that. And, that whole conversation around, getting the right team around you and, what to look for and what sort of assets there are and what sort of businesses they suit and what sort of, even down to the point where you're talking about, well, you need to sort of be able to have this much money available to invest to be able to do this sort of strategy and that kind of stuff. Like, I found that really useful and really, I don't know where else you'd get that sort of information. I've never come across it before. So thanks. It's been great.
That was my finding. I was looking for the answers to these questions.
Right.
Like, it's non-existent.
Yeah.
It's like absolutely non-existent, which is a massive, massive shame. So I will mention this one here, and it is important I say this. Like, I am not a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not qualified to give financial advice. And honestly, if you listen to this podcast, like, don't listen to me. If anything, I just want to be the cue for you to go and actually speak with professionals. I share my own experiences because I was incredibly frustrated that when it came time to start looking after my money, is like, the information was just terrible and crappy.
Yeah.
So that's a big reason in why we've created the show we're creating today.
Yeah. And I mean, in truth, from my experience, the information didn't exist. Like you say, it was crappy. I just couldn't find it. And so, I mean, obviously you get people that are they're always trying to flog one thing or another, in relation to investment schemes and programs or whatever it might be. But there's never really sort of been a neutral playing field where people are coming to the table and they're saying, well, these are experiences we've had with all these kind of things. And then there's a whole bunch of representatives and experts and, people that you can speak to that can potentially help you if it sounds interesting. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. So there's a huge problem in the financial industry, and I'll speak to this because I think every business owner should be aware of it. The huge challenge with the financial industry at the moment is the bias. So if you're a guy that's really into shares and you sell something related to picking shares, for example, here, then when you talk to someone, you have a huge bias in selling towards your best interest.
Right.
Like, the share guy isn't going to go, oh, hey, look, you should do shares, but look, hey, property is also good. Like, they never say that. And then if you go to the property guy, guess what he's going to pitch you?
Yeah.
So we end up with this thing where like no one's really giving unbiased opinion, and they kind of try and just like shit on each other, to be frank.
Yeah.
Try to just position in that way, where the reality is like shares might be great for some people, but not all. And property might be better suited to others, but not all. And some might do a combo, and that's perfectly okay. But if you are a business owner, how do you kind of evaluate some of these things or look at it in this way? And that's some of the information we really try to help people understand.
Yeah. So, I mean, how did you sort of get into this? I mean, I know you obviously used to be a plumber, which I'm sure a lot of the listeners and viewers out there are going to enjoy and relate to. But I mean, how did you end up down this path specifically?
All right. Well, I'll take you through a few stories here, because this is like a long journey for me. This isn't something I got into last week. Like, I'll be frank, this is like a very long time in the making. Now, I had a bit of a unique experience growing up with my father. He was actually a carpenter and a builder. And when I was about 12 years old, he actually had a workplace accident. So he was very unfortunate that he was using some prefab trusses, and for whatever reason, they were fabricated incorrectly at the factory. And when he was walking on one to hinge it, just collapsed. So he had a very severe injury, and went from being able to be a carpenter to overnight no more being a carpenter. And that was obviously very, very distressful financially on our family, because guess where all our money was?
Right.
In his business.
Right.
And my father had not necessarily anticipated that he was going to be leaving the trade at any point in his life. He wasn't that old at the time, but it left us in a very, very real circumstance where, because he hadn't built wealth outside of his business, that this was a hugely challenging thing. Now, I was, I think, 12 or 13 at the time. Now, I was young enough to not really understand it, but old enough to realize that we didn't have ourselves set up in a way that was useful. So this is experience number one, where as a kid growing up, I'm like, it doesn't make sense to have all your eggs in your business. And I think that particularly trades, because it is a physical thing, where I'm sure someone today, as we're recording this, has had their back go or their knees go, and they're not going to be working in the trade next week like they once planned they would be. So we've got to get a little bit more realistic, especially in the trade. The second thing that really piqued my curiosity was when I was about 19 years old. I was a plumber at this point, and one of my friends was a chippy. Again, maybe it's these chippies.
Yeah.
Right. He got given, his boss retired, and he got given his boss's business. So very, very fortunate that he did his apprenticeship with a guy who wanted to pass it on to him, and he got given a business. Clients, relationships, work, team, bookkeepers, like the whole thing got given it. And within 6 months, he was bankrupt. And he was really, and this was a huge one. When he got given this business, all of a sudden this, luxury four-wheel drive appeared, nice new Land Cruiser.
Yeah. Here we go.
Jet ski? Did you say jet ski?
Yeah,
Did you know, Matt, they make trailers where you can get 2 jet skis on one, so you can go with a friend?
I live on the Northern Rivers, man. I know all about this.
Well, you can see that where this story goes is you've got a guy that suddenly comes into money, doesn't know how to manage it, is 100%. A very, very good chippy, like many trades are. Most of the trades I met in my time are actually quite strong in their skill.
Yeah.
But where they lacked is they didn't have business owner skills.
Mate, that's one of the reasons why we have this podcast.
Hugely so. So for me growing up is I'd had 2 experiences, funnily enough, both around a trade, which is why I'm so thrilled to be able to come here and talk about this today. But it's like when I had seen those types of things, my experience in the world and the lens I view it is probably a little bit different than most. So from in the home and then seeing a friend bankrupt, I was like, well, this is like, there's something more to this, and this story is way too common. So for me, in my whole business career, I've always been thinking of the things from like having all my eggs in my business is a risk. Not having business skills and being able to read financials really well and manage money is a risk. So I've always been quite savvy with how I've done those things. And then as my business at the media company particularly had become more successful, my attitude towards what to do with my money and how to handle it had been, well, I better start building something outside my business. So if anything ever happens, I can make sure that my family is looked after and done in a certain way. So that's the like personal conquest to like, how did I end up here?
Yeah.
And then it's only through doing it, like actually doing the thing, has the time come that I'm really excited and eager to share this with others.
Sure. So, I mean, at the crux of it, the underlying message is really building wealth outside of your business, right? Like it's and whatever that looks like for the individuals, and for any of you guys out there that are in business and you are looking at wealth creation, outside of the business. Well, if you're not, you should be, for the reasons Charlie just explained. But I mean, it's a tricky, like, where to start, is like the golden question, with this sort of thing. And I think that's where I've been getting a lot of insight from, your podcast and the content you guys have been creating. Because I think that's often the hardest thing. But I don't know, you've spoken about it some of the podcasts, actually, even, down to the point of when you run a business, you go to the bank and they won't give you finance and all this kind of stuff. It can be quite a daunting conversation. You don't really know who to turn to for the better part.
Yeah, so this is where it's really interesting. This was my most fascinating findings. And then also, like, what is hopefully a little bit relieving for a lot of business owners as well, is it seems to me that for whatever reason that it gets hidden from us, that business owners don't know that we actually have a massive unfair advantage when it comes to wealth building.
Right.
But it's like it's a secret. It's not a secret, but it's a secret. It's like it's this unspoken thing. If you're a business owner, right, you've got this huge advantage where you don't necessarily have to obey the rules that people who work in a 9-to-5 do. And I'll give you the obvious one. If you want a pay rise, you can get one next week.
Yeah.
I'll give you these other ones here, is that if you're a business owner and you know how to run a business, well, guess what? Wealth building is just another business. Like, the understanding of how to run a business, you've already gained through what you do. And people who work in a 9-to-5, not that there's anything wrong with that, don't have those two opportunities to significantly increase their income when they want or need, rather than, asking someone for a raise.
Mm-hmm.
And two is that if you understand what running a business is and having a team, all of these same skills become the best assets to have when it comes to wealth building.
Mm. Yeah, I like that concept of treating it like a business. I think it was one of your recent ones where they're talking about, well, that's the whole mentality. And I think it was one of the guests you had on the show, and he was saying business owners are good because they understand how to treat this like a business, not like a hobby, and that whole, this is the strategy, this is the plan, this is what I want to do, and it's kind of a familiar conversation, if for choice of better words or not. I guess as well, though, there's a lot of maybe misconception I've had this experience over the years with, people that talk about having investments, and they're not really investments. Like, they might, live in a house that they've got a mortgage on, and they, I've got an investment. I don't really understand the broader concept of investing. And I think that's kind of something that, like, that information is kind of hard to come by on a platform that's not biased,
Yeah, the whole Robert Kiyosaki thing, right, was like, the house you live in is not an investment.
Mm.
And it's like, because it doesn't, his thesis was because it doesn't produce any cash flow, right? So there's no tenant in the home because you live in the home. And while I don't necessarily 100% agree with that, I do think it's great people don't think of their house as their sole investment.
Mm.
You should be looking for things. And just looping around to this other point is like, we use property as the example here. Like, a lot of people, when they think of property investment, like, just go, okay, well, I'm investing in a house. And it's like, no. Starting an accommodation business.
Right.
Like, you're opening a hotel, and it's like your tenants are your customers, they're your clients. And it's like, well, okay, well, now it's suddenly like you think about it differently. Or now I am running this business. If you had if you're a tradie, which hopefully you are if you're listening to this, it's like, are you telling me right now you don't have a bookkeeper? And maybe some don't, but you can at least understand you should. So do you think if you were going to start an accommodation business, maybe you should have a bookkeeper?
Right.
Or like, if you do, tag and testing on your power cords, like, why wouldn't you do tag and testing in your accommodation business?
Yeah.
Like, and this is where a lot of the skills become very, very transferable, but it's a really exciting proposition nonetheless.
So while we're on this topic, I suppose I'd love to dive into that conversation around team, because I feel like, well, especially in my situation, like, not having access to the right people in the right areas for the right services, and that whole little, obviously, like, buying a property is not as simple as rocking up to a real estate agent and giving them a check. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen there, which I think for the better part, a lot of people don't really understand. And a lot of them have a lot of fees, and if you don't have the right people in your corner, like business, of course, you're inevitably going to get tripped up or perhaps fall over at some point. So I'd love to hear your take on that whole dynamic.
Yeah, well, this just loops into what I was saying earlier about like having a strong business, and having a good business is so key here. Like if you're going to get into, particularly property is the big one that is more expensive sport, well, you got to have a way of funding that. And that's why having a good business is the step one when it comes to wealth creation, in my opinion. Now, once you've got that sorted, though, it's like when you look at going into, in this example, property, right? It is expensive and there are fees that go with it. So, for example, when I go to look and buy a property, I'm not out there picking the property. Like I engage what's called a buyer's agent so that they can go and find and purchase the property for me. So that's certainly not a small feat and can range from like $10,000 to $20,000 to hire a buyer's agent to go and do that for you, but can be well and truly worth it if that's the type of thing you're going after. Now, on the other side of things with that, and I'll speak into this team, we'll just do the property one for this example. Mm-hmm. If you were going to go into property investment, really the people you're going to want to have on your team is like the buyer's agent, who's the person who goes and sources and finds your properties, the broker, who's going to get you the finance to be able to buy the property, an accountant, so that they can set up your business and books and make things look a certain way so you can get access to that finance and also pay your tax just like you do in business. And then finally, you're going to want someone who's actually going to like manage the property so that once you've got it, it's looked after and dealt with. Now, there's a ton more people that go into this, but the relatable point I would bring back to it is like, if you're a carpenter right now, is like you've probably got a bookkeeper already. And if you were going to build certain types of houses, well, maybe you need a certain size team or amount of laborers to make that so. And the same is true over here. But this is just, once again, a reason why I think business owners can do particularly well if they want to get into wealth creation, because there's so many people that can come into it.
Sure. So the bookkeeping, all that kind of stuff. Charlie, I've got a bookkeeper in my business. They'll be able to look after the bookkeeping in my new property business, right? Where's the line between,
I love this question already.
Right. Because, I mean, or you know what, my girlfriend, my wife, there you go. My wife's a bookkeeper. My wife's an accountant. Surely she can do it, right? And this is, I suppose, where I'm going with this is obviously there are certain people that specialize in different things, obviously, and so, I've got a great business accountant, he's great for that, but is he really the right accountant for me for my wealth strategy? Perhaps not.
Yeah, this was so I actually got very lucky that my wife is actually an accountant and bookkeeper, right? I didn't realize how fortunate that was. I just, thought she was a very good looking girl at her 21st. And I thought I'd make my best efforts to take her home with me. Turned out she had this skill set that I didn't know would be valuable to me later on in life. Anyway, the point I make here is what was really interesting to me is like, especially on the topics of accountants, like good depends on the outcome you want. Now, there's some fantastic accountants out there for tax efficiency. They're going to get you the best return every year. Like if you are looking to pay the minimum amount of tax, then guess what? They're the best one for you. But if you're looking to make the biggest net worth, it's a different accountant. So and I'll give you a really good example here. You might have an accountant who's like, look, you should go buy a car because you're going to be able to write that off and bring down your tax. And then you go and do that. But then the next day you go and speak to your broker and you're like, well, look, I want to buy this house. And he goes, well, what are you talking about? You didn't make any money in business because you just bought that car. That $60,000 of profit that was sitting in your business, you bought a $60,000 car and you made nothing. Yes, you paid less tax. Congratulations. But you just destroyed your borrowing power.
Right.
So a really good rule of thumb here that I want people to think about is if your business makes $100,000 a year of profit, if you look in today's lending environment, then that means the banks will probably lend you about $600,000. That's going to be your borrowing power. But if you try and make moves to reduce your tax and then in consequence reduce that profit, so does the borrowing power you would have if you do choose to get into something like property. And that catches a lot of people out. Sure.
And like you say, for a lot of business owners, they are out there actively trying to minimize tax every way they can, which they probably don't understand the full dynamic of what that might mean, from a lending capacity. But again, I think this ties so heavily into like education and not having the right people in your corner, or perhaps having the right people at one point in time, but not having someone that can really overlook the entire strategy, like, because that might have served you last year, but it might not next year. And that conversation, in truth, is one that I've never had with my accountant. Well, I mean, it's not true. I actually have, and I've looped in a whole bunch of people that you've connected me with my accountant in relation to where we're heading with this. But the point I'm trying to make is your accountant typically, in my experience, doesn't pick up the phone every year and go, oh, okay, so this is what happened last year. What do you want to do next year? Like, that's never happened to me. So
I don't think it's going to happen either.
Right. And so the point I'm trying to make is, like, I suppose from the perspective of everyone that's out there listening and watching this, like, you've got to really own this yourself. You've got to understand, well, this is what I want to do. And then I've got to go and find people that can understand what I'm trying to do. And those people are probably pretty unlikely to be the ones you're currently dealing with.
So let's go into that. Let's just really unpack that a little bit. So if you've got an accountant that gets you a big tax return every year, right? He shows you how much money you're saving on tax, and you reinforce that you're really happy with him because of all the money you're saving on tax.
Right.
Guess what he's going to keep doing?
Yeah.
So you're, oh man, this is awesome. Thank you. I love my new car. Yeah. Right. How do we do more of this next year? You're like, you believe it or not, like unintentionally, you're telling your accountant, hey, how you are valuable to me is minimizing my tax.
Right.
Now, I will say there's another part of this conversation where a lot of accountants themselves aren't wealthy. Let's remember that. They're not trying to build wealth. They're not in this game. And like, that's completely cool. They don't have to be. But if you ask someone who isn't wealthy and doesn't know how to be wealthy, how to increase your wealth, might not go too well. So maybe check in with that first. But the next point of it is that as business owners, I like to think one of our better qualities is we take responsibility. At some point we said, look, I'm going to put my income into my own hands. Let's just put our wealth creation into our own hands as well. Like, let's be responsible as the person who drives that. Yeah. So I would love it if every business owner rang their accountant and said, this is where I want to get my wealth to, or my net worth. What role can you play in that? Have you ever taken other people to this journey? How do they do their books, or how do they do their accounts? What can I learn from that experience? And if you get a great answer from that and they say, look, my other clients, this is how they're doing it because they're, going into this wealth stuff, fantastic. Mm-hmm. You got a great accountant. But if they say, look, we don't really do that, it might be time for you to look for someone else and start hunting out the other people that are already achieving it.
And again, tying back to, I suppose, like how I started this conversation, you might have an accountant that's really good with your business, but they might not understand the wealth creation process. Does that mean that you should be looking at a new accountant altogether, or just a new accountant for that side of what you're trying to do on the wealth side of things?
My opinion is you should have one accountant to be able to work in both worlds, because your business is so heavily tied to your net worth that to segregate them is unlikely. There are some unique circumstances where maybe that isn't true, but I think at the very least, you've got to make sure that if you're going to have two accountants, they've got to be very aligned to an outcome.
Sure.
But again, I really don't like the idea of my accountant not really being able to contribute to this journey.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like you want everyone on the same page, don't you? Inevitably, like the more people are intertwined and in communication with each other in relation to what you're actually working towards. Same in business, like it's no different. Like communication will solve 99% of the problems, and if they've already got existing relationships, and I suppose on the flip side of that though, I mean, I've been in this situation before where I've had my accountant who's been great. Will he get us to the next stage? I'm not sure. But, we actually got to him through a bookkeeper that we were using, and she was horrendous. She put us onto him, but they were intertwined. And I suppose the point I'm trying to make is sometimes you'll get, people that have relationships with others, which may not suit your style or your direction or your business or whatever. So you do kind of have to have the blinkers off to a degree in relation to looking for, like definitively what it is you want,
Yeah, it's fit for goal, right? Fit for goal. I'll share a quick story here. Is like, I'm very fortunate that I have a fantastic accountant. I'm very, very fortunate that he's built wealth for himself before we even met, and that he's also had experience in a bunch of things with his other clients that I do today. Now, I went to my accountant and we did something which may seem almost bonkers at one point. We went to our accountant and said, look, we want to buy a lot of property quickly. So we went through a stage where we bought 8 properties in 2 years. We went real hard on acquiring a certain opportunity. Now, the point being is my accountant here, like I needed him to know that I planned on doing this because basically he's hunting for like, Charlie, you're going to pay a lot of tax in the next 2 years. Yeah. And you need to pay a lot of tax in the next 2 years so you can get the borrowing power to actually be able to do that. So what I want him looking for me is like, no, like you're not going to over contribute to your super in this example. And that might not be a good example. And no, you're not buying any cars.
Yeah.
Like he's very, very in tune to like, this is what you need to be focused on if that's the outcome you want to achieve. Mm-hmm. Your outcomes might be different, but again, your business accountant plays a huge role in this.
Sure. Yeah. And I suppose that's, like they're the questions you need to ask, right? Like and I mean, I've had shocking experiences with accountants well, not entirely shocking, but I've had some pretty bad experiences with accountants in the past. And in truth, the one that I'm really thinking of, like he was quite successful, had great investments, all this kind of stuff, but he was just a terrible communicator. And I never knew what was going on at any point in time. And it was crippling. And
wait. You're telling me when you think of accountants, you don't think great communicators?
I know, but I mean, it's probably pretty common with business in general. Sometimes we just get caught up in expecting people to understand what we're talking about, regardless of the industry. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is when you don't really know anything about anything, and maybe there's a bit of a lesson here for you guys out there that are trying to, maybe in the way you're communicating with your existing clients, maybe you should tone it down a bit. I like to say pass the mum test. Like if your mum can understand it, then it's probably a good level of communication. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, it's very hard and it's very frustrating when you've got people that, aren't communicating and aren't on the same page as you, and you just never really know where you're at, So having that team around you is paramount.
I just think of it this way, right? It's like at the end of the day, we want to take more personal responsibility in these areas. We really, really do. If you run your life waiting for your accountant to call you and tell you how things are going to be better, you're not going to get a good result. That's like going on site and, well, doesn't this client know I'm trying to grow my business? Like, can't they pay us more profit here? Yeah. Of course, that's not going to happen. Like, we take responsibility for our own profit margins in business. Like, we're the ones that are quoting the jobs. Like, I think you stand the chance of being far more successful if you just accept it's on you to lead the way.
So where do we start with all this? Like for the people out there that are like, okay, this is great. I want to start my wealth creation journey. I mean, aside from, I strongly recommend tuning into the Full Stack podcast, but what's the starting point for viewers, listeners?
I think the first thing every business owner has to have is the epiphany that this can't wait for later in life. Most of us want to build wealth. I actually haven't met a single business owner that doesn't want to make good money and be rich.
Yeah.
Like that's a big driver in why a lot of us end up in this as business owners is we want to be financially successful, but we have this like someday mentality. It's, no, one day we'll look after it. Someday when it's, things are better in business, that's when I'll start doing it. I think that's the first thing that needs to change.
Well, and I think as well, like that mentality around like wealth creation is often too closely tied into the actual business. Do you know what I mean? Like you work hard, grow the business, have significant growth in the business, which doesn't really in any way, affect or have any, like it doesn't really affect your wealth creation strategy because it's just the business it's improving. It's not actually anything beyond it.
Well, that takes us to the second epiphany, Matt.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, I jumped the gun, did I?
Oh, you did. You absolutely did. But I'll say like the second thing that comes out of this is if you're going to start doing this today and you're going to build wealth, it's got to be outside your business. Like your business is merely the ticket to wealth building. The reason for your business to exist is to produce a profit to create wealth. And it's like when you start to think of it that way, the idea of continually reinvesting in your business to grow it suddenly doesn't seem like the best option to a point. You do have to get your business to a point, but I think for a lot of business owners, they just always putting everything into the business and never putting anything into outside it. And that's what leaves them to starting way too late or not at all.
Yeah, it's really important. And I think often there's that situation where you're in the business and it does start producing and then you feel like that needs to be constantly reinvested in order to fuel it. Like there's no, there's not like a strategic allocation that's being removed from the business for yourself to invest in the wealth and that kind of thing. In truth, I learned a lot of this stuff through like Profit First. That whole Profit First framework's just been an absolute eye opener for finance within the business in terms of allocations and that kind of stuff. And of course, I know you guys talk not so much Profit First, but like that whole, having the right allocations for your wealth strategy and that kind of stuff, which you really need to build into your into your business finance model for it to actually become a reality.
The one that grinds me particularly here, Matt, though, is a lot of guys, they find like they spend a few years kind of struggling, right? And then eventually they get a successful business. And then instead of investing in wealth creation, they go, I've worked so hard, I deserve a new house, a new car, a holiday. And like when a lot of people get really honest with themselves, they probably already have funds they could be using to build wealth, but instead have just pumped it into their lifestyle.
Right. I suppose there's a fine line, isn't there, between, well, I suppose lifestyle is like perception and wealth is reality.
Well, good news is you can have both, but I think if you're investing too heavily in your lifestyle at the expense of ever building some wealth, probably not going to go well.
Right. Lifestyle, twin jet skis.
Maybe they'll bring out some sort of quad jet ski trailer. You can really level it up.
Double stacker.
But to your point there, point three I would just say is education. I think that just like we had to get educated in business or do an apprenticeship, which is a form of education, like wealth creation is something you need to get educated and skilled in personally. It's not something you want to rely on other people for, because I think you stand to get taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
Like I admit I made some silly mistakes, very, very silly mistakes, because I was hugely trusting in some people that didn't deserve trust. And that was my fault. I take responsibility for that, where I'd really should have invested in understanding these things at a bigger level so I could be a better client for these products. Now, I'm not saying they're all sharks, and there's certainly some great things in there, but you do want to get some education around wealth creation. And then the fourth point there is building the team that can help you hit these goals. And it's like, that's your kind of 4 steps there.
I mean, like, it's probably not that an uncommon story for the people that are hearing this. I mean, they'll happily invest in a business coach. They'll happily go and invest in a, business management course or something like that. And, if you're treating your property or your wealth creation like a business, then it's much the same, right?
Again, just singing the same beat here is that when we look at it, like wealth creation is a business. If you apply a lot of the mentalities and like habits, rituals, and strategies from it, they work really well here.
Sure.
That's what I feel like it's this unspoken thing. Most business owners I speak to think that wealth creation, well, wealth creation is you just give money to this like guy or institution, and then they grow your money and then you retire on that. It's like, maybe, I doubt it, but it's like, that doesn't sound like a very savvy way to go about it, where if you approach it more as a business owner and bring that mentality, your chances of being successful are much higher.
Awesome. Well, mate, I'm loving this. So if the listeners want to get more information, and in truth, for you guys out there that are listening to this, if you've got any, or watching this, if you've got any comments or if you've got any feedback or anything you want more information on, I've said to Charley and Grant, like, I'm more than happy to have them back on the show as regularly as as they're willing to come back on to answer any questions, give any insight into various things that you might want any more in-depth information into. So please, if you have any further questions about anything you've heard today, if you've got any experiences you want to share, if you've got any, challenging opinions or whatever it might be, wherever you see this come through, post it in the comments, reply to the email, whatever it might be. I'm more than happy to invite the guys back on the show, and hopefully they'll accept. They do have some fantastic resources. I can't encourage you guys enough. Go check out the podcast. It's full stack. You'll find it on every platform. Is that right, Charley?
Yeah, so it's full stack business owner, and the name comes from that. We've got to go full stack here. We can't just have the business owner skills. We've got to build the wealth skills and other skills within our business so we can be successful.
Fantastic. And the website as well, fullstackbusinessowner.com. And there's got some great resources on there. I know Charley's talking a lot about tracking wealth. They've got this amazing wealth tracking Google sheet, which is so cool. So go and get hold of that. It's awesome.
You just made Grant stay somewhere, just so you know. He spent so much time on that spreadsheet.
I can tell he did. In truth, it sort of blew me away at first. I looked at it and I was like, I'm not quite ready for this yet. I'm still sort of gradually filling it out. It's pretty comprehensive, but anyway, he's done a great job with that, and I'm sure there's more to come. So what is to come?
Yeah, so obviously the podcast is something we're doing more and more of, and I highly encourage, please come and check it out. I'd like to think it'll be worth your time and a good opportunity to start some education in this space. We do also aim to build some really cool tools like the spreadsheet, which you've had a look to, which is the wealth tracker, and some really handy guides. Down the road, we are absolutely going to be putting out some courses and training programs to help business owners further with this space.
I know originally it was pretty heavily geared towards Australian business owners. Is this still geared towards Australian business owners, or is it sort of gone a bit more global now?
Yeah, look, I will say some of the more generalized topics we speak about will work anywhere in the world.
Sure.
Right. So like a lot of hey, tracking your wealth's important. That works anywhere.
Right.
But being we are Australians and we've done this in Australia, a lot of the strategies, tactics and tools we've used are very applicable to Australians, and Australians will get the biggest benefit from it.
Yeah, sure. So anyway, in general, the content itself is pretty cross-border, but then perhaps some of the strategies you might want to speak to people in your own area just to make sure that it's applicable. But for the better part, it's information, and hopefully, if nothing else, it makes you think a little bit outside of the box and opens your horizons to maybe some other opportunities, which you can go and explore wherever you are, whatever market, so on and so forth. Mate, thanks so much for your time. It's been great. Thanks again for all the work you put into the podcast in its youth, I might add. It's awesome. But yeah, definitely, I definitely hang for the episodes each week. So, mate, thanks very much for all the work you're putting in there.
Appreciate it, Matt. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, all the links to Charley and the team over at Full Stack Business Owner are going to be available within the show notes. So you can head across to the siteshed.com and you can get access to all those things. And again, if you've got any questions or anything you want to follow up on, you can either ask the questions. Charley's in the Facebook group too, so you can ask the questions in the Facebook group, or you can just post the comment wherever you see this come across social or in your emails or whatever, and we will inevitably get them answered for you. Charley, thank you, sir. Listeners, that's a wrap.